I never imagined a simple trip to the cafe could turn my entire world upside down. My name is James, and my wife Olivia and I had always tried to maintain what everyone called a strong marriage. Friends described us as the perfect pair: supportive, loving, and dependable. But behind the smiles and social media posts, there were cracks I had begun to notice. Small lies, excuses, and the subtle distance that slowly grew between us. Olivia was the life of every room she entered, charming, witty, and effortlessly magnetic. People were drawn to her energy, including me when we first met. But over time, the warmth that had made me fall in love with her seemed to drift away, replaced by cold glances, hushed phone calls, and an air of secrecy I couldn't ignore. I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe I was overreacting, but a nagging feeling deep in my chest refused to let me rest. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when I decided to go to our usual cafe, hoping for a quiet moment to gather my thoughts. I had no idea that Olivia had arrived there earlier, sitting at a corner table with someone else, a man whose presence immediately set off alarms in my mind. His laughter, the way she leaned in slightly, and the casual touches that seemed harmless to an outsider were screams to me. My stomach sank. I wasn't naive. I had seen signs before, but seeing it firsthand was a different kind of pain. I sat at a table a few feet away, pretending to sip my coffee while my mind raced. My hands trembled as I watched her smile at him, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Every word they exchanged, every glance, felt like a sharp blade cutting through the remnants of trust one had in our relationship. My heart pounded, and yet I knew I had to stay calm. Reacting impulsively would solve nothing. I needed to understand, to observe, and most importantly, to make sure she understood that actions once seen cannot be undone. Minutes passed like hours, and my mind formed a plan. A quiet, deliberate move that would let her know I wasn't oblivious, that betrayal could not hide in the shadows. I reached into my coat pocket, pulling out a small note I had prepared in case suspicions ever became reality. My hand shook slightly, but my resolve hardened. Sliding the note across the table toward her without a word, I left the rest to fate. What happened next would change everything. Olivia looked up, her eyes widening slightly as she saw the note slide across the table. For a moment she froze, the carefree smile vanishing instantly. My heart thumped, but I stayed seated, silent, letting her process what I had silently communicated. The cafe noise, clinking cups, chatter, the hiss of the espresso machine, seemed to fade away, leaving just the tension between us. The note wasn't long. Just a few words carefully chosen. I see everything. It was simple, yet it carried the weight of months of suspicion, mistrust, and heartbreak. I didn't know if she would panic, deny, or confront me, but I was ready for any reaction. What I wasn't ready for was the sudden stillness that took over her face. She looked at me, then at the man she had been laughing with, and then back at me again, searching for some clue, some explanation. The man, whoever he was, hesitated, sensing the tension, and left almost immediately. Olivia remained, fidgeting, words failing her. I stayed calm, my voice steady when I finally spoke. "Olivia, we need to talk." She nodded, pale and silent, leading me to a quieter corner of the cafe where we wouldn't be overheard. Every step felt heavy, like walking toward the inevitable collapse of everything we had known. Sitting across from me, she tried to meet my eyes, but her gaze faltered. The weight of the note hung between us, heavier than any argument we had ever had. I could feel the betrayal burning, not just in my chest, but in the way she struggled to breathe, to explain herself. I didn't interrupt. I let her speak, let her confess in her own way, knowing that my calmness was more devastating than any shouting could be. The truth spilled out in fragmented words, in excuses, in trembling admissions. Months of secrecy, small lies, and hidden rendezvous finally laid bare. Every explanation sounded hollow because actions once seen cannot be erased. I realized then that the pain of betrayal is not just in the act itself, but in the quiet knowledge that someone you trusted chose deceit over honesty. But just as despair threatened to consume me, a subtle twist emerged. I didn't react with immediate punishment. Instead, I started laying out the consequences carefully, deliberately. This wasn't about revenge through anger. It was about ensuring she understood the magnitude of her actions, the ripple effect on our marriage, our lives, and the trust she had shattered. Every word, every pause, every calm statement became a tool. A precise instrument of accountability that left her trembling, realizing that this would not be swept under the rug. The following days were surreal. Olivia avoided me, but I noticed she couldn't escape the quiet weight of what had happened. I didn't need to confront her with anger or dramatics. The note, the cafe incident, and the calm but deliberate conversation had already set the tone. Every glance she gave, every hesitation in her voice, reminded her that trust once broken leaves permanent cracks. I began to subtly reclaim control, not with threats but with quiet precision. I restructured our schedules, made small decisions that highlighted her dependence on honesty and transparency, and ensured she realized how every choice mattered. Even mundane tasks became lessons. The truth was inescapable. Olivia, who had thought she could hide behind charm and excuses, now faced the weight of her own actions. Then came the final unspoken reckoning. One evening I asked her to join me for a review of our week. She agreed hesitantly, expecting perhaps a quarrel or tears. Instead, I calmly outlined every instance of deception I had uncovered, connecting the dots with clarity that left no room for denial. Her apologies were quiet, fragile, and inadequate, and yet, they marked the beginning of a reckoning she couldn't ignore. The power of my calm, composed response was more effective than anger, humiliation, or public exposure could ever have been. But I wasn't done. The ultimate twist was the subtle, yet complete, restoration of balance. I made it clear that trust had to be rebuilt step by step, action by action, and that I would no longer tolerate half-truths or secrecy. Olivia had to see, feel, and understand the consequences of every choice she had made. There was no dramatics, no spectacle. Only the quiet, undeniable clarity that comes when someone you have wronged refuses to be shaken by excuses. By the time the week ended, the dynamic of our marriage had shifted irrevocably. Olivia was humbled, thoughtful, and acutely aware of the privilege of trust she had once taken for granted. And I, through patience, observation, and deliberate action, had reclaimed the respect, clarity, and moral authority that her betrayal had threatened to destroy. That night, as I reflected, I understood a harsh truth. Betrayal can shatter, humiliate, and wound, but true power lies in patience, precision, and calm. The lessons of trust, accountability, and emotional consequences are often learned the hard way. And sometimes the quiet, deliberate response leaves a mark far deeper than any shout ever could. Olivia would never forget that night, that note, and the realization that actions, once seen, define the future in ways words alone never could.